Welcome to the Deal by Me podcast, where we ask guests to tell us your story and we put the spotlight on you. Hello there, this is Dr. James W. Smith, your host. We transform lives by encouraging and inspiring. Someone encouraged and inspired this host, a former gambler, a lawyer, inmate, and his life was transformed. The same can happen to you. When you listen to any of the Deal by Me podcasts, please support this ministry with a monthly recurring amount for as little as $3. Check out my website and see what I offer that can be encouraging, inspiring, and transforming for you. I'm available for speaking engagements, in person, and virtual seminars. Please contact me through my website, www.dealbyme.com. I have with me Elizabeth Mikotowicz, who says 5 years ago she was painting murals as a federal inmate. Now she has her own art shows and launched an environmentally friendly clothing brand based on her art. Prison opened her eyes to the systemic racism, cruelty, corruption, and inequality in this country. So she now shares or tries to expose what she witnessed and endure it to legislation. I think you're going to enjoy our guest today. She will come to us with lots of experience, especially as it relates to the prison system and other matters that she will be able to share with us. I'm grateful to have her come and be a part of this podcast today. Elizabeth, it is so good to have you share with this podcast and listeners who will hear your story. So I wish that you would share with us um, a little bit about yourself and where you've been interviewed from.
Definitely. Yeah, I'm down in Texas, but I lived in Maine pretty much my whole life. I was adopted from Brooklyn, New York, and when my dad got a job up at University of Maine, we moved up there, and I pretty much lived my life there mostly. And it's 94% white people. I was very sheltered to, the class system we have in America. And, I was never exposed to violence or drugs or, any type of, chaos like that as a kid. I was well loved, supported. I had everything I could ever want and, you know, really great parents. And I was really lucky. But once I got out on my own, I dated some really abusive men, and I already had one daughter um, from an abusive guy, but it wasn't like so abusive that I'd be in the hospital or anything like that. But when I got with my son's father, he'd assault me once, and I'd be in the hospital. Like he when I found out I was pregnant with my son, my skull was showing. Like he hit me with a wooden dowel, and like they had to sew the muscle back, then the skin back. And I had never done drugs before that. Like I had experimented a few times, but I liked drinking beer and smoking pot. That was my thing. And they prescribed me opioids, and I had already seen my entire community like go down the tubes because of these pills that the doctors were prescribing. And I wasn't on my parents' private insurance anymore. I was on, now state insurance and classified as, in the poor class. And I noticed I was treated a lot differently. And so, I also started getting seizures because of this head injury, and I go deaf and blind for moments at a time. So now I was like not a safe caregiver for my 14-month-old. And that was like a really awful thing to have to come to terms with. And at first, I took the Vicodin they gave me, but then they sent me to the pain clinic because they said your blood pressure keeps skyrocketing. You're in too much pain. It's making this head trauma worse. And so they tried prescribing it to me again. And I'm like, I don't want to be on this regularly. And they're like, well, you have to be. And I'm like, well, I don't want to take it. I don't want to get addicted. I don't want my baby to get addicted, And they're like, well, you're on too small of a dose to get addicted. And if you don't take it, then we're going to have to call CPS because you're pregnant and you're refusing doctor's orders. And so obviously I took it, and, the abuse got worse. And after I had my son, I really didn't try to like not take it. Like, I'd try to, stay in control of it and not take more than I was supposed to. But once I wasn't pregnant anymore, I was like, "Oh, screw this. Like, I can't deal with this." And the abuse got worse. I mean, he was trapping me in the bathroom and torturing me for hours, like to the point I'd beg him to kill me and just get it over with. And finally, I went to Spruce Run, the battered women's shelter in Bangor, and they turned me away with two beds open. They said my injuries were too extensive and my situation was too severe, and it put the other women in the shelter in danger. And this is a problem with victim based shelters. Um, yeah, like they completely turned me away. They literally said my situation was too severe. And, the girl that got the bed, the guy didn't even hit her. The guy kicked her car. She lived in the same housing unit as me. We both lost our apartment. She lost hers for partying. I lost mine for being domestically assaulted. And, they wouldn't help me. And so this is a problem with victim-based shelters. A friend of mine who was trying to get in the human trafficking shelter, they wouldn't let her in because she was too scared to snitch her pimp out. Like, so you want victims to do law enforcement's job for them instead of helping them. And that's the thing. But, 70% of American women that are in prison have some sort of domestic violence or sexual assault in their background before they even go to prison. Like, we are the women that slip through the cracks and we were in desperate situations. And so, after that, oh, sorry.
Oh, it's okay. I'm just trying to get in because your story is so amazing, and I really would like to do a little bit more dialogue with you about certain things that you're talking
Definitely.
about. Now, when you talk about the abuse, is this from your boyfriend, from your husband, or what kind of
No, he was
abuse were
my
you?
boyfriend.
Okay,
Like I got pregnant on birth control twice.
okay,
All the women in my family did. I didn't even meet my biological family until I was 18. And yeah, they were all very fertile women. They all got pregnant
oh,
on birth control, and they all had like six, seven, eight kids.
okay. Now, I note that you talked about the opioids. Now,
Yeah.
are you saying to listen to this podcast that it was the opioids that got you going? And
Yep.
okay, so you became somewhat of an
Uh,
addict after you began taking opioids. Is that correct?
Yeah. And
Okay.
I was in so much chronic pain. Like, and I had a therapist tell me that one of the most dangerous types of addicts are ones that have chronic pain or trauma. And I had both. Like, the situation, caused me to have this physical injury that still lingers on today, 15 years later. I still suffer from that injury. And, trauma on top of it, because every time my trauma gets triggered, my brain will pull that card up of that substance and be like, you need this or you're going to die. Your brain literally works against you when it comes to addiction. And I didn't know that. Like, I didn't know anything about addiction. I thought, people that got addicted were mentally weak. And,
Mhm.
I didn't understand it literally rewires your brain to make that substance as crucial as water. And then you throw the trauma in with it, and you throw the physical, ailments into it. It was a whole different monster I was dealing with, from a psychologist perspective, than just addiction.
Okay, so part of it, I'm just trying to make sure that I get it's going smoothly for listeners of this podcast. Are you saying that you became an addict as a result of your first beginning taking the uh,
Yep.
I'm having one of those tongue
Vicodin.
tied moments, but that
Yep.
drug and and you have taken it because of your injuries and the fact that you have been abused. Is that how you start taking it?
Yep.
Okay.
It literally went to the hospital for that injury. And yeah. And I tried to refuse it too. Like, that's what makes me, I'm not blaming the doctors for my addiction because
Okay.
that's not their fault, but
Mm,
it's their fault that they threaten me like that. Like, I don't feel that's okay to do to
okay.
somebody.
Okay.
And
Okay.
the thing is, opioids, all they do is make the pain receptors in your brain more sensitive.
Okay.
So when it wears off, you're in twice the amount of pain than you ever would have been. And that's what makes me angry, because they're lying to me, telling me that, like, I'm putting my baby in danger by not taking this stuff. And I'm telling them, I'm like, it's highly addictive. I've watched so many people I know, their life fall apart because of stuff like this. Like, I don't want to take this.
Okay.
And so,
I see where you are now, and I'm trying to just make certain that listeners can follow your story. Now, as a result of you becoming an addict, it seems like you ended up in prison. So tell us
yeah.
how that came about.
Well, I told you about going to the battered women's shelter. I had made a deal with my father that if they wouldn't help me, I would sign temporary guardianship over to my children, because, if my ex showed up with the cops, he'd have to hand my kids over. And so once I did that, I lost all my health care. So I couldn't go to the doctor anymore. I couldn't go to manipulation therapy anymore to try and work on this injury. And I was like self medicating on the street. And I was still running from this man and had nowhere to go, had lost my apartment. And, I was scared. I was desperate. Like, I was addicted to my medication that I couldn't get anymore. And so, drug dealers basically protected me. They gave me place to stay. They walked with me down the street if, my ex was around. And that was literally how I survived. That was the only way I could, like, see, a way to survive this. And eventually, and I always had one foot in and one foot out. I'm like, if I can just get an apartment, then I can get my kids back and I can get all these resources back, and, I'll have my life again. And because you can't get, you can't get vouchers and you can't get things for your kids unless if you have an apartment and they're in your custody. So it's
Hmm.
like a catch 22. But in order to get them back, it's like I have to have all this stuff to begin with that, I have no way of getting. And now I was like partially disabled, having seizures, and I really couldn't work. Like I was a hazard, having, people, having me on a job. If I'm going to have a seizure, like employers didn't want that. I also had crazy ex that would show up at my jobs and, threaten to have me fired and all that fun stuff that comes with domestic violence.
So
Um,
you have not always been that person. I take it when
no,
you first started talking that you were in a nice family, grew up
yeah,
in a good family, uh, basically,
never
in
was
a
around drugs.
yeah. So all of this came as a result of you getting involved with the wrong person, number one,
Yep.
and after this, the abuse started, and when the abuse started, then of course the drugs became a part of what you were doing to kind of stop that and the
Yeah,
abuse and the fact that you had to go because he had battered you. So
yeah.
that's how all of this came about. Now, getting
And he
to
was already a drug addict. Like, he was already a drug addict. He would steal my pills, and, then he brings heroin around. And the first time I ever shot up, he literally trapped me in the bathroom and he's like, you're going to do it and you're going to do it the right way. And I had already been beaten by him that day and I didn't have any fight left in me. And that is literally how, like, I shot up for the first time. And, it was my fault. I continued after that, like, as, you can only,
okay.
after a while, it becomes, your own choice. You either choose to get help or you don't. And,
Okay.
without insurance, I really had no help. But, then I went to jail and, was forced into sobriety, thank God. And that's when I started seeing, all the institutional abuse that was going on. Like, I had no idea there was still like a race system in this country. Like, in Maine, we don't see it.
Hmm.
You just don't see that stuff.
Okay.
Like,
Okay.
it's too rural for that. And so, I mean, like my first week at Somerset County, I witnessed an entire pod of women get stripped out because they signed up for a razor, and a male sergeant wanted a list of who shaved their vaginas and who didn't. Those that did were punished. And this is
Hmm.
just the PG stuff that goes on in there.
Hmm. Okay. Uh, were you in a state prison or federal prison?
I was in federal prison, but I went through a couple state
Okay.
prisons.
Okay.
I did a 7 month state bid, and then the feds picked it up 2 years later in 2013. So I literally went to jail for the same drugs twice.
So how long did you spend in prison?
I had a sentence of 37 months and 3 years probation, and I didn't make it out 6 months on probation before I went back. They had me on like $1,100 worth of psych meds. And by the time I got out, I was physically dependent on them. And some of those psych meds, like lithium, your heart can stop if you just stop taking it. And they don't tell you this stuff when they put you on it. They just say, we'll put you in the hole if you don't take it. And
Hmm.
so I was on all these meds, and I get out and I have no way to pay for this because Paula Page was still our governor. And they literally told me, you have to be pregnant if you want health care, or you have to have your other kids in your custody. I'm like, I'm just trying to be okay enough to get my kids back. Like,
Okay.
I can't, and,
So
but
you
once sorry, go ahead.
so you got out, and then you were out for 6 months, and then you went
Yeah.
back, and that was
Yeah.
because you kind of fell back off into drugs again. Am I correct about that?
Yeah, I'd have a
Okay.
panic attack every time I left my house. And,
Okay.
I was starting to space out my psych meds. And so I was spiraling mentally that way. And,
Okay.
the PTSD was just so bad. I kept smoking weed. I kept doing Suboxone. Like, yeah, I kept relapsing. And so they gave me 9 months to wrap it up.
Okay.
And I painted murals while I was there. And I painted cups, the coffee cups for the inmates.
Hmm.
And I do portraits and, stuff like that.
Okay. Now, for listeners of this podcast who, they haven't had these kind of experiences, well, some may have, but some haven't. Uh, could you give them a little idea of what prison is like?
Yeah, basically they strip you of your identity. You're
Hmm.
given a number. They call you inmate. You have to strip for them if they want to search you. I was forced to strip illegally in front of cameras, under threat and duress of being maced and extracted. Um, and I filed a PREA complaint against them, which stands for Prison Rape Elimination Act. So anything sexual goes,
Hmm.
under this. And because in the state of Maine, the DOJ law book, it says you cannot have a camera inside of a cell. And they did at Somerset. And they even lied to their commissioner saying that they didn't have any cameras, but they're refusing to give me the paperwork. So when I filed the complaint against them, um, they got, when Alderson got the complaint back, they wouldn't even allow me to hold it, let alone have it or send it home. They just simply would not give it to me. So when you get out, you have 100 days to file an actual complaint. If you don't have the PREA complaint at the time or proof that there was an outcry at the time, nobody will help you. And they know this. So by law, they have to give me the paperwork, but there's no consequence if they don't. So they just don't give anybody paperwork. And it's they admitted to everything I was complaining about, and they deemed it unfounded. So they deem it unfounded, so it can't go any higher or to an outside source. So the abuse just gets buried. And mind you, these institutions get to do their own investigations. So they pretty much, and if you even try to speak out against them, they will come for you. The retaliation is real. And, for those of you who are like, oh, well, I wouldn't strip in front of a camera, I'd just say no. That's your right. They will show up 12 deep, all suited up in SWAT gear, electric shock shields, batons, mace. They have these cans they throw in your cell, and it is chemically designed to take the oxygen out of your throat. It's absolutely terrifying. I've never been in a cell that was directly hit, but I was in a block that was hit, and it comes through the vents. So even the inmates that weren't doing anything wrong, guess what? You're all getting punished. And
Wow.
it's terrifying. I mean, I was in solitary and I had a sergeant telling me to kill myself while I was in full blown psychosis because they gave me the wrong psych med. That same officer told another inmate to kill themselves and they had to cut them down from a suicide attempt. These are the types of things that you see. Oh, also, and I forgot to say, the captain at Alderson and four of his subordinates, the guy doing my PREA investigation and the paperwork and all that against Somerset County, they all got arrested for raping and stalking inmates and tampering with PREA evidence. So I wasn't even their worst victim. They just tampered with my paperwork and, covered for another jail. They were literally raping and stalking, inmates. I remember at night, there was this one girl who would come in at these crazy weird hours that nobody would come in. And she would just go to the shower and you could hear her sobbing. Like, and I knew something was wrong, but you don't ask questions in prison. Like, if you ask questions, people think you're like setting them up because
Hmm.
that's what snitches do. You mind your business and you keep your head down and, you won't really have a hard time.
Well,
But, it's really the guards that you have to worry about as women. It's the guards.
yeah, I can tell that this is a traumatic experience for you that you had, uh, and you are out now. I assume. And how
Yeah.
long have you been out? And I assume you also have been maintaining your sobriety. Tell us a little bit about that and how you got to where you are
Yeah.
now.
So when I got out 5.5 years ago, Janet Mills took over for Paula Page, and she expanded main care. So I was able to get health insurance, and I was able to get trauma counseling. I was able to get MAT treatment when I needed it, and I had to deal with my trauma before I could deal with my addiction. And once I dealt with that, I got out of the MAT program, and I'm still sober. And I started doing art shows in the community, and I found a company called Le Galeriste from Canada, and they turn your art into this beautiful feminine line of environmentally friendly clothes, and it comes in plus sizes too. It's very inclusive, and I'm just really happy with the fact that it's sized properly. Like, as women, we have pretty and skinny shoved down our throats since the time we were born, pretty much telling us that that's what our value is based on, how skinny and pretty we are. And a lot of brands out there will size their clothes really, really small. And I've watched people have complete body dysmorphia issues and eating disorders because just a couple brands want to size their stuff, three sizes smaller than, normal brands. And
Hmm.
so this brand doesn't do that. It's actually a little bit big and it's really flattering to, all body types. And there's really just something here for everybody. And that's what, that's the product I wanted to put out. I didn't want to
Okay.
profit off of people's addictions and darkness anymore. I wanted to put like beauty and
Okay.
all that into the world.
So you would say that for the last 5 years, you have been sober and a what I would call a model individual in society. Would that be correct?
Yeah, I try
Okay.
to be.
Okay. All right. Now,
I haven't broken the law.
okay. Well, reason I am I've been in your situation. I've been confined. I'm a my background is a lawyer, a gambler, inmate, and now I'm a retired pastor. 3 months short of 33 years at the same church. So my
That's amazing.
background is extensive, and I'm interested with where you're going, your background. I just had someone I talked with today who is going through something. She, alcohol is her problem, and she says
Yeah.
that she falls back and falls back. So uh, there may be other people who listen to my podcast who have the same situations. They they into it a moment, and when they feel a little down and depressed, they want to give it up, but then all of a sudden they back into it. What could you tell
Right.
somebody since you've been sober for 5 years? How would you encourage or inspire someone who is going through something even right now.
Yeah. You know,
Who-
I had like I don't know. I had a lot of people I had to let go of. And it was really hard for me to do. I had to cut people out of my life.
Okay.
Even to the point where I would have to delete them off Facebook just because seeing them would trigger me and, either make me angry or make me want to go out and get high or make me fall into back, old behaviors. And, you have to change your surroundings, people, places, and things. That's what's
Mm,
going to get you to relapse. And if you can fill your time, find a hobby, even if it's something dumb like adult coloring or paint. I like painting. I like art. You have to have something to fill your time where you're doing something, because boredom is what is it? Idle hands or the devil's playground, something like
hmm
that.
hmm
When you're bored, that's when all these emotions set in. And they always say talk about your feelings and you'll feel better. Well, with trauma, that's a really bad thing to do because you're just re-traumatizing yourself and your brain doesn't know the difference between a memory and what's actually happening.
Okay.
So you have to distract yourself. You have to learn to distract yourself.
hmm Oh well,
And
I hear you very well. That's really good advice. And I know because we're everybody goes through something, and they have to be able to kind of grasp something to make them allow them to get through what they're going through. And
right,
and to hear you, say this is very encouraging. I had to do it myself. The gambling had gotten to me, and I had to kind of come to grips with it. But I
right.
did, and ever since 1986. So you know how long that's been, and I
It's the year I
passed
was
it.
born.
Oh, okay, well, see that. Well, then you know what I'm talking about. So that's been some years ago, but it's just good to hear you get there and to just be able to talk with you and know where you are now. Let me ask you this: if someone is interested in some of your artwork, or I don't know if you have
Hmm.
a book or what the situation might be, or a website that somebody can get more information on you or what you do or what have you, how can they find you or what? Or is there a website they
Yep.
can go to?
Yep, I have a portal website with Legalaries. So it's legalaries.com/en/Elizabeth.Mikotowicz. And you have to put my name and stuff because they have other artists as well that have their own brands.
Hmm
I'm also on Instagram and TikTok and Twitter. I never go on Twitter, but I have an account and all the handles are the same. It's EPM underscore art underscore 1111. Oh, and
Okay.
just to add on to that last question, there are these things called binaural beats. It's sound healing, and you can get them for free on YouTube. They have, hundreds of thousands of them. So, I literally quit smoking by rewiring my own brain. You can do this. It takes patience and it's not overnight and you really have to be consistent with it. But I literally told myself I hate cigarettes, I hate smoking, this is disgusting, I hate this, I quit. And in my subconscious, like the more I did that, the more I literally hated it. Like I would get grossed out, like why am I even doing this? And then literally one day I just never picked up another cigarette. So I mean, it is possible. We do have a lot more power than we care to realize.
Hmm. I'm amazed by your story, and it reaches home a lot because I can identify with you. I was in for 5 years, so
Oh wow.
I know what it is in federal prison, Ashland, Kentucky. Uh, but you say a lot that kind of bring things back home. One of the things that I want to ask you a question about, because you say people assume inmates get free meals and medical treatment, and you tend to
Good
you tend to
question.
have, you tend to have a response to that I'm not sure what it is. So I want you to say it so that
Yeah.
listeners can hear that.
I was there when the feds decided that because we are women, we don't need as much food, and they literally cut our food in half and gave us child-sized servings. And
Oh,
the food we get comes in boxes. Right on the side of it, this is not for human consumption. I mean, I watch so many people's gallbladders go, and you can buy food on the commissary, but we are working 40 hours a week for $5.25 a month. Not a day, not a week, a month. And everything on the commissary, like a package of ramen noodles, one individual package costs 40 cents. It costs $1.50 in there. So they're extorting us every which way. And the guards will come in and take the best food and leave us with the junk food. I mean, it was really quite disgusting what was happening.
now,
And the doctors, 60% of the Alabama prison doctors have lost their license by the medical board. So it's legal for doctors who have lost their licenses to work at prisons and native clinics. That's right, they're still actively committing genocide. And another thing I noted, like a friend of mine broke her foot shoveling. That was her job. And by the time they brought her to the hospital, the bone had fused back together and they had to re-break her leg. I mean, the brutal things that go on in there with medical. I watched, I don't know how many women die of very treatable things. I watched minor surgeries be performed by inmates because they wouldn't do anything for them. Then they want to charge you $5 for a band-aid.
mm, well,
They wait until you're dying. One girl had a giant tumor in her rectum and blood was pouring out of her shoes. And they still would not take her to go get tested for anything. Take her to a real hospital, nothing. And then by the time they did, she had like 3 months left to live.
now
They kill people
I'm
in there.
I'm assuming that all of this was in the Alabama State Prison.
Yeah, this was at Alderson, and yep, It happened everywhere. I mean, this one guy had diabetes in Penobscot County Jail. The jail doctor took him off his insulin and put him on commissary restrictions, so he couldn't order the food he wanted. Like it's that type of petty cruelty as well. I mean, here's another. This really made me angry. I met a handful of women that had been sterilized against their will. And this was before Trump filled up the ICE camps with the refugee women. And you heard about the refugee women getting sterilized. They were doing this to American inmates. And after like the fourth one, I realized not a single one of these women that I've met is white. And now all of a sudden it's a great day for the white lives with the overturning of Roe v. Wade. Like they're still actively committing genocide. And if I was a black woman, I probably would have gotten 6 to 9 years.
Mm-hmm.
And like this is not freedom and justice for all. We make up 25% of the global incarceration population. And I'm sure people, I love it when people say the system's broken. No, it's not. It's doing exactly what it was designed to do, which is oppress the many and lift up the few. And like I said, we were making $5.25 a month to work. And when we work in there, we work. I mean, there were girls laying pavement. You go to call centers, you go to the jobs that these big corporations don't want to pay people a minimum wage for. For instance, a hospital saves $350,000 a year contracting their linen to be washed by inmates instead of paying regular civilians to, minimum wage, not even a living wage, a minimum wage. These 1% rich elite are so greedy. They do not even want to pay us a minimum wage. They want to put us all in prison and get a free workforce. They have bypassed slavery laws by doing this. And there is a reason that over the pandemic, all these prisons across America were taking out PPP loans to add wings onto their prison. They weren't even fixing the places. We had an inch of black mold in the showers at Danbury. And they built a brand new facility down the hill for $80 billion.
Elizabeth,
But the other facility is killing women.
Elizabeth,
And
Elizabeth,
I'm sorry, what?
I can tell that you're very passionate about it, and I really can tell that, and I wish we had much more time for you to share it all, but you can't tell it all right now. But want to ask you your last question here is you why does America, land of the free, in your opinion, have the highest rate of incarceration? You talk about this, and you're really passionate about it. So I just want to get
Yeah.
your thoughts on that.
Well, you see, they're criminalizing homelessness.
Okay.
Corporations said that they would buy out all of the prisons, and we have more prisons than we do colleges. So if they buy out all the prisons, they said we'll buy them, but we need to have them be maintained at 90% capacity. They're making over $100 a day for every person that's in there. On top of the fact they're putting us to work for pennies a day. These corporations don't even want to pay us a minimum wage. This is all about a free workforce and throwing away the undesirable. Like I was saying, there were three empty properties for every homeless person. Now there's 29. They created this massive housing crisis, and now they're criminalizing homeless people. You can't even feed homeless people in some cities without getting a fine. That's criminalizing it.
Mhm.
So what are you going to do if you're criminalizing somebody? You're just going to put these people in jail, and then you're going to put them to work, and the cycle continues. They say they want crime to go down, but they're profiting off crime.
Okay.
They're profiting off of the suffering of the American people.
Okay, Elizabeth, if am I correct if I make this statement that part of your mission is to really try to do what you can to change the way the prison system is operated? Would I be correct in saying that?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I just want to make
We
sure I
just got
kind
a
of know where
law
you were.
passed. Yeah,
Okay.
we just got a law passed in Maine mandating all jails provide tampons and pads free of charge to women. And that's a problem too. Women will make their own tampons and like get
Okay.
infections from it.
Okay. All right. Uh, I'm sorry to leave you. I can tell you, feel your passion. You are really passionate about this area, and and that's great. So there's nothing wrong with that. And
No,
it's
I said what
great.
I need to
Yeah,
say.
it's great to have you. Share that with us. And so there you
Thank you.
have it, Elizabeth. How you pronounce your last name, Elizabeth?
Mikotowicz.
Mikotowicz. Elizabeth Mikotowicz sharing with us today, and I'm trusting that all of you will go to her website and look at the art that she has. And I know she is very passionate about what she is doing now. And so I want to say to all of you, peace and blessings unto each of you.
Amen.